fellow veterans and family members out there. Welcome back to another Veterans Central. Today is going to be a very special day for me because one longtime politician and civil rights activist, John Lewis, is getting some commemorative stamps through United States Postal Service, which I think is a fantastic honor for that man. But what's really going to make this special is because it's one thing that he had said was create good trouble. And that's what I'm hoping to be able to do with this podcast is create good trouble. Because not only did we get the PACT Act passed, but in doing so, I have been learning of all these other veterans and their family members and active duty members that are being gaslit so bad by the Department of Defense, the VA, and even our own government. Our government has been poisoning us for an extremely long time, and they try to sweep it under the rug. So hopefully today is the day where all this gaslighting ends and veterans and their family members and even the active duty members that are still stationed at these bases that are contaminated will finally get the relief and the aid that they need. And the government finally confesses, hey, yeah, we are the ones that are poisoning you. So let's go ahead and get this show on the road, shall we? All right. That's right. My name's Tim Hauser. I am the Gulf War advocate. This is Veterans Central. And today I have a very special guest. I have been admiring the work this woman has been doing for some time now. So please welcome to the show, Army Major Mandy Feindt. Welcome to the show, Mandy.
Thanks, Tim. Thank you so much for having me and lending this amazing platform for us to amplify the Red Hill story.
It's my honor to be able to do this. And folks, Mandy is heading up the charge on Capitol Hill for people that were stationed on Hawaii that were contaminated by a fuel leak at a Red Hill fuel station. And it's not just a little leak. I'll be put in the description below when I post this on YouTube later and everything else. I'll post links to videos that show the leak and everything. It's not letting me show it on here for one reason or another. But so what base did this happen at?
So multiple. Red Hill is a bulk storage facility owned and operated by Joint Base Pearl Harbour Hickam on Oahu, Hawaii. And so when it leaked, and again, for those who don't know what Red Hill is, maybe I should start with that. Okay. Red Hill was built, this strategic asset for fuel, right? And it was an underground bulk storage facility that was built in the 1940s. And it made a lot of sense in the beginning, buried underground, our adversaries wouldn't see it, whatever. But, looking back on it, they built it 100 feet above Oahu's sole, freshwater aquifer. And so, yes. And so, a lot of people call Hawaii the gas station of the Pacific. And that is, Red Hill is part of that. And unfortunately, strategically, it was a great asset and it made a lot of sense. But for the people of Hawaii, for the families who lived on the Navy's drinking water system, for the land and the environment, it's no good. It hasn't been good for the past 80 years. Our Sierra Club in Hawaii reported, Civil Beat, which is one of our local stations, reported a couple of months ago that since its existence, there has been 73 spills and totaling in about 180,000 gallons of fuel that have leaked. And so, this is not new, except this time when the Red Hill spill happened. There was absolutely no denying it because so many people got sick.
Now, do you think these leaks occurred because of lack of maintenance, or just that the system was old and they just didn't replace any of the parts to it, or
all of the above? In fact, we can post, the investigations. When we do this, they're public knowledge, so we can post the investigations that way if folks want to know. But all the things that you mentioned, there was a lack of maintenance, there was a lack of accountability, there was a lack of supervision. And for many years, this was a classified asset. And so there wasn't a governing party. We in the military, we govern ourselves. And unfortunately, I think we've proven over the years with other issues with the military that potentially we need folks to come in and help us out with doing things like that, especially when it comes to matters of public health and safety.
Yes, I agree with that. And now you stated that not only did the base use this source of water, but the surrounding community did as well.
Mm-hmm. So there are several on base, obviously, housing areas that were impacted. There are also off base community areas that once, the military occupied, but has since given that portion of land back to the people of Hawaii. But they kept the same drinking water system and the same pipes and the same, source of water is coming there. The Navy supplying that area store water. That area specifically is called Kapalina Beach Homes in the Ewa Beach area of Oahu, Hawaii. So the housing, on-base housing areas were impacted. All of our places of work were impacted. Our child development centers were impacted, schools, shopping centers. I mean, another thing I'd like to point out is, Pearl Harbor. It's one of the top 3 most visited historic sites in the world. I think they average about 4,000 people, last time I checked, a day. Also in the Navy drinking water system. And, if you filled up your refillable bottle or Nalgene bottle or whatever it was, I mean, you likely were exposed to that water as well and had no idea.
Now, from the videos that I've seen when I did some research on this puts fracking to shame. Now, I know you've seen the videos where people out in the country where they do all the fracking in the rural areas, they'll turn on their faucet and then they can light the water on fire. This looks like this is even worse than that. There's a video of some lady who was filling up their tub, and it was nothing but a yellow sheen, like an oil substance just floating on top of the water. And so then she filled up her sink. Now this is on base. The video came off of base, and same thing happened. It sat there. She filled up the sink, sat there for a few minutes, and same thing. All that fuel just rose to the top of the water, and I'm like, man. So obviously, there's a lot of illnesses being caused by this. What are some of the more common ones that, I wouldn't say common, but what are the more prevalent illnesses that folks are experiencing?
Yeah. So in the beginning, before we knew about this, because this had gone on for some time, and we didn't know because the military failed to warn us, but the military knew, right? And so I'll give you an example. We moved to Hawaii in the middle of the pandemic in 2020. We lived off base for a while, actually out in Ewa Beach, where I was talking to you about. But then we got an offer to live on base on historic Fort Island, front row view of Pearl Harbor. And, we couldn't say no. When in any other time is the Army going to offer me, waterfront property? So we're like, heck yeah.
Yeah.
Not only that, but it was a 100-year-old home. It had survived the attack on Pearl Harbor. So we just felt so incredibly blessed and gracious to be given that opportunity. I mean, to raise our kids in like that piece of like history, like living history, right? How cool. So when we moved in, it was end of April, early May of 2021. And I would like to start by saying that we were a very healthy family. My husband is an athlete and is in the golf industry. You know, I've been in the Army for, at that point, 16 years active duty, about 20 altogether with my reserve time. And kids, both like healthy births, no issues, right? When we were living here in Colorado before, when we moved out to Ava Beach in Hawaii, as soon as we moved into our Ford Island home, which again is serviced by the Navy's drinking water system, we started noticing things like skin rashes, vertigo, headaches that we'd never had before, even after like a good night of drinking, right? Like we just are not, you know, we don't have chronic headaches. And my son was goodness 13 months old when we moved into this house, and he developed this like cough, like could not get rid of it. And, you know, lightheaded. I would also get like these like hot flashes. And I was like, I think at the time I was like 36 or 37. And I was like, am I like going through menopause or something? Like, what's wrong with me? Like, I would get full body hot flashes. I just couldn't figure out what was going on. But never once did we consider, very reasonably thinking people, never once did we consider that it was the water that was like making us feel this way. Like, we should buy stock in COVID tests, because mind you, COVID was also going on around this time. And like, so we just chalked it off as like, oh, the kids got the CDC crud, which is like what every pediatrician and doctor at Tripler Army Medical Center was telling us every time we took our kids in. Or, you know, like maybe we have COVID or something. Like we bought so many tests, we were tested so many times and never had COVID. And so that was all around the summer of 2021. And then in May of 2021, my parents came to visit, and we, as a couple, my husband and I, celebrated our first anniversary, and you know, went to a different island. My parents came to town and watched the kids, and they were sick the entire time they were there in November, like throwing up, couldn't stay off the toilet. My mom was there, like she was there for 9 days originally and lost 11 pounds. Like that's how much she was like losing from her body. Like, and then over Thanksgiving break, there was like no denying it. Like every, you know, major social media, right? The power of social media, which we have found, you know, was talking about like, do you smell something in your water? Do you see something in your water? You talked about lighting your water on fire. There's a gal, her name is Jamie Simic. She was one of the first to sort of sound the alarm on this, and is part of our legal team. She was lighting her water on fire, which I thought was insane, but like it was real. And we just kept, you know, writing to people and, you know, trying to contact folks like the housing office and stuff and be like, what's going on here? But yeah, like people, like thousands of people, 93,000 people is how many. And if I didn't say that before, 93,000 people were impacted by this crisis. And basically, I lost my train of thought, and I'm so sorry. And this is live and embarrassing, but 93,000 people were impacted, and they cooked their Thanksgiving with contaminated jet fuel. They filled their baby bottles up with contaminated jet fuel water. And we all were sent, like 6,000 people were sent initially to the hospital. And those, you know, initial symptoms, because we're talking about, you know, gastrointestinal issues, like we're just like, it was coming out both ends, like throwing up, diarrhea, vertigo, headaches, all of those things. I mean, we went to the hospital. We got sick actually on December 11th, which ironically was like the Army Navy game. I'm an Army girl. This is a Navy asset, right? And so you can only imagine what's come of that. But, you know, we all just got so sick, and like my son had never thrown up, projectile vomiting. When I went to the hospital, I left an adult depends. People couldn't control their bowels, like just so sick. And that has since, you know, we all were able to evacuate from our homes. We evacuated from our home 3, almost 4 months, shuffled around between, you know, 7 different hotels before we got a compassionate reassignment to get off the island. But what the symptoms have been that have sustained have been, you know, gastrointestinal issues. My husband's had 3 surgeries, like gastro surgeries, pulmonary issues. Both of my kids had, you know, bronchioscopes since we got here, you know, at Children's Hospital, and they both have lung damage. Neurological issues, things that we never had before, like chronic pain will not go away unexplained, cognitive deficiency, vestibular dysfunction, auditory processing, hearing lots of, I didn't say that, like things that you don't even
Mhm.
think of, like with toxic exposures, burning the tiny hair in your cochlea. Now you can't hear anymore, and you're given hearing aids. And I think the
Right.
biggest thing too is all the mental health stuff that comes from that. And with this being PTSD Awareness Month, like I'd love to highlight that. You know,
Mhm.
there's a lot of fear and anxiety, and if you don't have it, I think that something might be wrong with you, because like as a parent, the fear and anxiety of your kids drinking jet fuel, and the trauma and the stress that we as a community have experienced, like it has been it's been unimaginable. And so I think I covered a lot of the symptoms. I'm sure there's more, but yeah,
Mhm.
it's been awful.
And you brought up a good point there too. This has got to be affecting everybody mentally as well. So the mental issues that are people going, the anxiety of not knowing, and yeah, it's hard to fathom that they're just trying to sweep this under the rug. And I I know this is a sore subject with you, but
Oh gosh, which one?
well, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin just recommended Admiral Samuel Paparo to become the Navy's 33rd Chief of Naval Operations. And isn't Paparo the one who knew about all this, and he's the one who's been trying to sweep this under the rug, so to speak?
I wish I had a cocktail for this one. So Admiral Paparo is the commander of Pacific Fleet, right? So he is one of the most
Mhm.
senior in charge. He ordered the, in my opinion, shoddy investigation on what happened at Red Hill. He was ultimately part of decisions that were made and commands that were given in terms of public notification and things like that. And so, I have a great deal of respect for Admiral Paparo's career and the position in which he serves. But as a parent and as a senior leader also in the military who cares a lot about public health and safety, and especially of our junior service members, it's disheartening to know that someone who was in charge of such um, deliberate decisions that impacted thousands of lives um, has now, been nominated to this position. And again, it hasn't been confirmed, and there's a process in which it will go through.
Right.
But the fact that there was even a nomination, and same, like I have a great deal of respect for, for Secretary Austin. He's retired first-star Army general. He's like, go Army, right? But
Mhm.
you know, I just think it's unfortunate that, here's what I think. I think it's a strategic move. I think that, and this is, I'm speaking for myself. Mom may have been here.
Mhm.
Major mom is what people call me. Like, I'm speaking for myself. Like, we're going to take off the Army hat for a second. Um, I think that if you nominate someone who's been in charge of this, right? Clearly, in good faith, we would not nominate someone like that's in charge of such a big deal, like a big crisis, if it really
Mhm.
was that big of a deal, right? So I think it sends a
Right.
message once again that Red Hill isn't really a big deal. And as someone who is impacted along with 93,000 other people, along with an entire island of people from Hawaii who have had their land destroyed and who live this with the same fear as I do as a mother, I can tell you it's a really big deal what has happened at Red Hill and what continues to happen, and the decisions
Mhm.
that were made by leaders who were entrusted with public health and safety. Um, and so I think it's disheartening. I think that it sends a message once again. It downplays the significance of our exposure. And, quite honestly, the public has called for a lot of these folks who made these decisions for the resignation. And it's certainly
Right.
a slap in the face. And I'm not like, I'm a mama bear at heart. I'm not like completely cutthroat. Whatever happens with their career as far as like, demotions and things like that. I think that these folks should retire. And I certainly don't think that in any situation when it comes to Red Hill that these folks should be given the opportunity to advance their career, should be promoted to the most senior executive level for the Navy. That's a kick in the gut as a
Right.
service member, as an impacted
Mhm.
family. And can you imagine, living in Hawaii where like that's your home, like that's where you've grown up, that's where your ancestors are from. That's like, as a person who's lived there, what the bigger impact is here. And the last thing I'll say on it, just as a mom, is that, and I'm sure you saw this, like I really broke down about this the other day, and it hits me to my core, is that, there's a sense of accountability in life, and certainly in the military. And my kids are very young. They were 1 and 3 at the time of exposure. They're 3 and 5 now. And one day they're going to know. I mean, Red Hill will have forever impacted our lives forever, right? And one day I'm going to have to tell them about Red Hill and like what happened. And I'm sure that the question will come up is like, what happened to the bad guys? What happened to the people that didn't warn us? And what happened to the people that made these decisions? And it is like, I don't know how to explain that now with this nomination. And I don't know, as a parent, how I'm going to explain that in the future, that the organization in which I have served and loved and been so proud of and have risked my life for, this is the way that we handle situations of this magnitude. And this is what we call accountability. Like folks being able to retire with their careers intact, awarded for this, promoted up the chains. And that just sends a sign that like, we're just collateral damage. It's like, we don't matter. And the fact is, we do matter. We do as a military. We do every single American that has been impacted on American soil by an American military asset. We matter. And this nomination matters.
I agree with you 100% on that. And I think a gentleman by the name of Michael here, I'm going to post his comment up on the screen so everybody can see it. And I agree with him 100% on this as well. You are doing some fantastic work. You are getting this whole fiasco into the public eye. And that's what's needed on all of this. And that's why I mentioned creating good trouble earlier, is you're creating good trouble. You are helping the people of Hawaii with this. And there are a lot of people who fought for other veterans that are now coming on board to help you out. And so I know there's a lot of people that are going to have your back on this. Now, one thing some of these folks here need to realize too is you are still active duty, correct? So you are putting your career kind of on the line by speaking out. And that's to me is why you're getting the Badass Woman Award from me. you I've only given that to 2 other women. Rosie's one of them. Rosie. And another one is her name's Jill. She works with TAPS. She's done amazing work with those veteran spouses. So I gave her that title too when I was able to interview her. So you are creating good trouble. And to continue on with that, do you think at any point in time prior to today that you actually sat down and said, am I doing the right thing? By risking my career, am I doing the right thing?
I had to put you on mute and I was trying to smile, but we are experiencing a massive hailstorm right now in Colorado. So if you hear something, that's what it is. I thank you for those kind words. And for Mike, he was a dear friend of mine. I have said before, like, none of this is about me. And to your point about, have I ever thought twice? No, I haven't. Like, I'm a mom first, and every meeting that I went to, whether it was, with senior military leadership utilizing the open door policy or all the way to Capitol Hill, like I have led with that. I'm a parent first, and I'm an old mom because, like you, I've been downrange and I've been around burn pits and I've suffered some impacts of burn pit exposure, melanoma being one of them, cancer, and then, infertility. So like it took us a while to have kids. And, when I was dropping my children off at the Fort Island CDC, most parents of 1 and 3-year-olds are significantly younger, at least by 10 years, than my husband and I, like well into our 40s. And I thought to myself, like, these parents are great parents. But they are our most junior soldiers, and I remember being a very junior soldier, and I remember like you don't know your resources. Maybe you haven't found your voice yet. There is certainly
Mm-hmm.
fear of retaliation, and I think, and I'll say this, I think it's a damn shame that we live or work in a society that you don't feel like you can advocate for your own family because of fear of retaliation. So that's certainly when we talk about going to the Hill and Congress and stuff, like
Mm-hmm.
something that I'm very passionate about as a human resources officer in the military and fixing is retaliation and free speech when it comes to our service members. But um, I thought to myself, I know exactly what's going on here. I know that our kids aren't getting clean water. I know that parents are being lied to right now. And it was a
Yep.
no-brainer as a parent and as a senior leader in the military to speak up. And I do remember there was one day my husband and I sat down and I said, I'm convicted. I'm passionate about this, and I feel like it is my obligation as a senior leader and as a parent. But like, they're gonna come for me. Just so you know, like they're coming for me. I will have a target on my back, and you know, such is life. That is exactly what has happened since. There has been a lot of retaliation from security clearance stuff to negative counselings to
Mm-hmm.
uh, leading a unit on a compassionate reassignment, no fault of my own, with four family members sick. For the first time, PCS without an award, which no one works for awards, but seeing these
Right.
senior officials, be awarded for their efforts at Red Hill is kind of a slap in the face. But I when all of this was going on too, I was in the middle of my board for lieutenant colonel. Like my lieutenant colonel was going on, and I was like, my husband, I was like, babe, like this is it. We can throw this one, like throw it in the towel in
Mm-hmm.
retirement. That's exactly what happened. And it's unfortunate, and I'm not the only one that has happened to. But to your original question, absolutely not. There's not a day that I've looked back or I haven't been able to rest my head at night knowing that this is the right decision for my family and for 93,000 other people that were impacted by this, and for the community, the greater community in Hawaii, and all of those folks who have been fighting this issue for decades. Yeah, that's how I feel about it.
All right. I like that answer. Oh yes. Now go back to Paparo here just for a moment. I saw a video of him being interviewed, and he said that some people have been disciplined and or demoted due to these fuel leaks. Do you have any uh, factual information about that at all?
The only two pieces of factual information that I have is Captain Spitzer, who was the commander of Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam, who sent a notification to everyone, knowing that our water had been impacted, could smell it, knew that had been this massive spill. He was the commander of the base, sent out an email notifying people that their water was still safe to drink. That gentleman was able to retire with his career intact, and he received a very senior award. And in it, which Task and Purpose, I think, or Several Beat, or one of those, folks obtained a copy of this award. And there was verbiage in there about, the decisions he made and how wonderfully he handled the Red Hill water crisis. That is one piece of factual information I'm aware of. And then the next is, this nomination of Admiral Paparo, the senior command in charge, now being able to potentially advance his career, if confirmed, to the 33rd Chief of Naval Operations. Other than that, I don't have any other factual information.
All right. Yeah. I found it a little odd that he did even mention that when he was asked. Normally, something like that, they would just on to the next question. And to me, I think he was just deflecting. He knew something. They were going to start questioning him about his decision, so I think he deflected. Um, Now, as far as the children that are affected by this, um, is there any um, like counseling or mental health programs or anything to help these children deal with these health issues that they're facing?
Well, yes, you know as well as I do, if you are, you know, a military family, a DEERS enrolled person, then you certainly have mental health services at your disposal. The problem is this crisis didn't just impact military families. I mentioned before that
Right.
there were several folks off base, Capilano Beach Homes being one of them, that were impacted by this. And so they have not been given the same, you know, resources, whether it is hotels to evacuate to or mental health services. So I think that's important to highlight. The other thing is that there is a significant amount of distrust right now with Tripler Army Medical Center because that is, you know, the place where 6,000 people roughly went, and they couldn't get an ounce of testing, not hair, not skin, not blood, not urine. When they went in, they were told that there was no testing for toxic exposure, for jet fuel exposure, things like that. Um, and so folks were denied, you know, even the basic level of care for, you know, a toxic exposure or a fuel exposure. Um, and ever since, so beyond that piss poor care, in my opinion, um, there's been a significant like push, you know, a narrative, if you will, that there's no indication of long-term health impacts. Well, to that I say, there's no indication because you didn't test anyone. So if you don't test, then clearly there's no indication, right? Like there's no evidence. That's because we are the evidence and you didn't test us, right? That's one. Two, there's also been this narrative, like we love to like spin things, put a pretty little bow on it and sell it, right? Like the slogans. And I know that because I have been a recruiter for the military, I've been a commander, like I've been a walking billboard for the Army for a lot of years, and I've sold all of the slogans, one of which being people are our greatest asset. And I believed that, and I have drank that Kool-Aid for a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, I'm all about like putting money where your mouth is. And like in the middle of a crisis, we have seen just how much people are our greatest asset. And there has been this overwhelming narrative of, um, you know, there's been no long-term health impacts. There's, you know, it was in and out of your system, and there's no testing, and um, you know, no one's been hospitalized. I remember I was hospitalized. Me and like three other families that are part of our legal group we're actually hospitalized at Tripler, and I watched on the TV, you know, Captain McGinnis, who was like the senior, you know, medical officer for the Navy, say there has been no hospitalizations associated with the Red Hill water crisis, and I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, how do you even say that? You know, and like those are the kinds of things that like we brief it and it briefs really well, but it just doesn't ring true. It doesn't ring true for me or anyone else really who has been impacted by this thing. So there's no trust. So when it goes back to like mental health services and medical services, you know, folks are scrambling. They're on a wild goose chase to find anyone on the island who will care for them, who will believe them, who will listen to them, who will treat them, or who won't use the information that they obtain against them. And that is a level of care that both Tripler Army Medical Center has given to our families, and also this, you know, bogus Red Hill Clinic that has been created, you know, in January of this year. Like, don't get me started on that one, but
yeah, I seen you roll your eyes back.
It's bogus. It's bogus, and it is a dog and pony show, and I stand by that. You know, the amount of like hell that families have had to go through to even get there. It's been sold, you know, to the media and to the public that those of us who have moved off island will have, you know, virtual access. That is not true. And then for, you know, forever, you know, again, I keep going back to the fact that this just didn't impact military families. So, you know, our civilians did not have access to this clinic. And
yeah.
Yeah.
Now, you brought up another good point, trust. We've been trying to get people to file their claims for the PACT Act, and a lot of people are hesitant in doing that because they've lost trust in the VA system altogether. Because they were telling us the same things prior to the PACT Act being passed, that yeah, there is no testing for toxins, there is none of this, there's none of that, but there is. The VA has what's called the risk center in in Newark, New Jersey, and that's where they do all that toxic testing at. But they only picked a certain amount of veterans to go there every year, and so and and I kept telling them, in order to build up that trust, you got to kind of open this up. You know, take the samples in Indianapolis and send it to New Jersey. The bill gives you more power to hire people. There you go. Hire more people to get the testing done. Now, I know since this is affecting uh, more active duty people, so it's going to work a different way. But the DOD, even though they won't admit it, they've been doing toxic testing on us ever since the Gulf War. So for them to sit there and say there isn't, it's just another gaslighting lie that they're pushing out there for us. And this is why I'm so glad that you agreed to come on to the show, because America needs to know that even our active duty people are being lied to constantly about what is happening to their bodies, to no fault of their own. They have no clue, but yet DOD does. And we just got another comment in, so I'm going to go ahead and post this up here for you by Teresa.
Oh, that's my aunt.
That's your aunt.
Hey,
Aunt Teresa.
We got the whole family on board tonight.
There we go. All right. And so for them to say that they don't have that, it's just mind-boggling to me, because we've known for decades that they've been doing it. Now, you said your husband's had several surgeries. Do you know of other people that have serious illnesses that needed surgeries as well?
Yes, there have been several surgeries. We represent one of 93,000 people impacted by this. We're a part of a legal team of about 3,000 folks. And the way that we have gotten through this water crisis has certainly not been because of the transparency of the military or any sort of resources that they are providing us. It has really been a community that has come together to share, symptoms, medical symptoms, to sort of, this is what my doctor said. This is the doctor that will see me, and that's actually going to treat me. And well, let me go see this person. And I can't tell you, how many text messages I get a day, about different symptoms that their kids are having, or all of the things. And so the simple answer is yes. We are one who has come to speak for thousands, and it is like when you say that, like, that thousands, that includes a lot of like innocent children, a lot of innocent civilians, and for me, I try not to get emotional. Whew. Right. But like, as a service member, that's just really disheartening to know that the organization, again, in which you have served, has been a source of it, and who not only is responsible for this, but to know the impact, and to know the lack of care, the lack of transparency, how this community of people have been treated ever since. It's I'd never even heard of the word, the term institutional betrayal before any of this, but I can tell you that what we are living as service members in the middle of this, it is certainly a sense of institutional betrayal.
Yes, sure is. I had a question, but it slipped my mind.
Well, that's because we have both been exposed, Tim, to toxic exposures, and it kind of does that to your mind.
It does, and then you try to keep the emotions back, and you can't.
Yeah.
Because even though this is affecting more active duty than it is veterans, it's still brothers and sisters. Because one day they're gonna separate, and then they're gonna come into the fraternity of veterans, and so the emotions I hope will hit everybody when not not just the ones that are viewing now, but the ones that'll view this later on YouTube and Apple and Spotify, and those emotions help them to get involved because it's not just um, Pearl Harbor, Hickam, and Red Hill. It's George Air Force Base, Camp Lejeune. It's and I was stationed at George Air Force Base for 7 years.
Oh,
That was
really?
that was my last base.
Hmm.
Only to come back to find out that the when I got sent off to the storm, I did not go with my unit. They sent me somewhere else, and so when I came home, my unit had already been back for several months. About and some of my troops in that were having babies, and I don't think one healthy baby was born at that time. And then to find out that the drinking water at George Air Force Base was tainted too at the same time, prior to us getting exposed to all that over in the war as well. And the general public has no clue
The
because
general public has no clue, but we as
mm-hmm,
service members don't have a clue. I mean, I feel like I have been living under a rock for my adult life, that I have had my
mm-hmm,
head buried in the sand. And I, like I said, I've been drinking the Kool-Aid and never once considered, like, I am not a, prior to this, like, some tree hugging environmentalist. I did my part by driving an electric vehicle and I recycled, and I never, I never like was into like water contamination. I
right,
knew about Camp Lejeune, but I didn't know the magnitude of it. And
mm-hmm,
what I have learned through this, unfortunately, is that this is something that our Oahu Water Protectors, which is an organization that has been formed on Oahu. Obviously, their name sort of says their purpose, but they pointed out to me, the military is the biggest polluter. Like, we
yeah,
leave the biggest environmental footprint everywhere we go, and it truly it is everywhere.
mm-hmm,
I think it was Hunter Seven Foundation, a couple like last week or something, just posted the top 10 most impacted bases or whatever it was, and the number one, by the way, was Pearl Harbor Hickam. Awesome.
mm-hmm,
But then the other one, which is where I received my compassionate reassignment to, is Peterson Air Force Base, where like here in Colorado. And it's like,
yes,
you just don't have a clue because we don't talk about it.
that's
But
right,
and we certainly don't promote it. But I think that it's important to talk about it. And I think it's important to know. And, I had a gal today say, oh, we were just chatting, getting to know each other. And she said, oh, do you live here on base? And I'm like, I will never live on base again. Like, that's a hard no, hard pass. Like, absolutely not, because
mm-hmm,
of what has happened to us and what we have learned in this experience about, the environmental footprint that the military leaves. And it doesn't get talked about enough. And I think that folks, because there are, imagine, in our community too, with burn pits, there's a lot of naysayers and folks who just don't believe and who are, like die-hard Navy, and I get it. This is a Navy asset, that's why I
mm-hmm,
pointed out, or that their family has not yet been impacted. And, I've met tons of those, right? Like, they called people like me, like crazy, right? Like, she is crazy, but like, those are the people who have buried their children, and that's a really harsh
mm-hmm,
reality, but that's my reality too. And that is what's happened. Like, there are a lot of folks who just don't believe, and because they just don't know. They don't know
right,
the magnitude of these exposures. They have no idea, just like you and me or anyone else, about the environmental footprint that we leave. And um, that's why I appreciate opportunities like this to be able to spread awareness. And like,
mm-hmm,
maybe that'll just like a little light bulb, and the folks will go do their own research, because it's certainly not our job to like to educate people. It's our job to advocate, and it's our job to like make people aware. And we can't make decisions for others, but we
mm-hmm,
can certainly like let folks know. Because like, I thought I was going to Hawaii, and it was gonna be my retirement location, like it was the dream job assignment. We had no idea about the history We,
Right.
Red Hill, we didn't know what Red Hill was, and had we known, like, certainly, we probably would have made other decisions for our family.
Right. Now, when I came back and saw what was happening to all the babies being born on George Air Force Base, it made me come to a personal decision where I was never going to have any kids. Because I figured if I created any offspring, that they were going to be born sick. So I made that mental decision. Actually, the DoD made that decision for me by denying that anything was wrong. And so I didn't want to take that chance. And I know that's got to be going through some of the single folks on base that are affected by this. That is this going to affect me from having a family later on down the road? Or that's got to be going through some minds right now with some of the single folks that are stationed there.
Absolutely. And I'll say two things on that and try to get through it without crying. First and foremost, I've always been I believe in the power of social media, especially being in the military, and how it connects us and how we can stay, in touch with our Aunt Terry that lives in Boston, Massachusetts, who just posted, but I used to be a person who just shared all the good stuff and like all the awesome things, but I recently shared, my husband and I, we got a late start in life and we had infertility issues and we lost a baby in between. So like we've already buried, a kid, like we've already experienced like loss, if you will. And so now I've got an opportunity, where I've got two kids in this world, and the military has taken away my right. When they failed to warn, they took away my right to protect the children that I was finally able to have through, multiple infertility issues. But I recently shared, my husband and I had not closed the door on, potentially growing our family. And so I found myself back in a fertility clinic going through all sorts of testing and blood work to make sure that we had we could make a well-informed decision on like how our bodies had been impacted by that. And I posted about that. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important in sharing like the good and the bad, right? Because this is not been all rainbows and butterflies, right? And I think that from like my like complete breakdown, like crying the other night. But and the amount of women who reached out to me and talked about like how they're contemplating not having children or their fear of having children in the future, like that is awful. But that is a reality. The second thing I'll say on kids is that I am so grateful for, like I said, Burn Pit Street, Rosie, Torres, one of the founders of like one of my dearest friends now and a mentor to me. And I'm so grateful for the veteran service organizations who have come together and opened their arms to us. And another one is Camp Lejeune, right? And there are two gentlemen in particular who have just like since the beginning have been amazing, and they experience virtually the same thing. Like history has repeated itself, and that's what they said to me when they first talked to me. Jerry Ensminger and Mike Partain. And the first time I talked to Mike, he was like, "It's hard for me to even talk to you. Like I want to be here and support you, but like it's hard because we have fought for so many years or decades that something like this would never happen again." And I've kept in touch with them. They've sort of like paved the way for our community, and they've been so amazing to us. And I recently flew out there for an event that Camp Lejeune had, and Mike and Jerry took me around the base, and we went to Camp Lejeune, and we saw, where they grew up and all of that. And their documentary, like I watched that when this thing first happens. Semper Fi, Always Faithful. If you haven't, Semper Fidelis, Always Faithful. If you haven't seen it, watch it. But I remember watching in the documentary, this baby heaven. And it is a piece of land where like, I think donated by the state, like all the kids who, were born still or who didn't live a long life or who suffered, the ultimate impact of toxic exposure at the hands of, Camp Lejeune drinking water. And when I went out to Camp Lejeune, we went around the base and all of that. And, Jerry was the driver, and my folks actually came too, because my parents live pretty close to Camp Lejeune. And so, Jerry and Mike are in the front giving us the tour, and Mom and Dad and I are in the back. And Jerry pulls off on the side of the road, and we end up in like a graveyard. And I'm like, what in the world are we in it? And sure enough, he took me to baby heaven. And it was one of it was an awful it was an awful fear. It was an awful reality, like, as a parent of young children, or as, a young person potentially considering to have more kids, to see that firsthand, and to know how many people had buried, their innocent children. Like, it was hard. So I definitely, I empathize with, your decisions and the decisions of thousands of others who have been through something like this.
And one thing that gets me is all these higher ranking officials, commanding officers and everything that are blowing this off, they're affected by this contaminated water as well. They lived on the same base as you. They're drinking the same water, bathing in the same water. And yet they say there's nothing wrong. But they got to be sick as well. So is it somebody higher up telling them, hey, you need to lie about this? Or is this actually how they feel, even though they know they're sick as well?
Well, I would certainly, Tim, as you know, as being an active duty service member, I would certainly never accuse a senior ranking officer of lying. But I think that when you get that senior ranking, and in a situation like this, I think a lot of it is political. And I think a lot of it is, unfortunately, I think we have an image to uphold, and an image that, certainly our adversaries are watching and could use against us. And I think that there are a lot of really good people in the military, and I think there's a lot of good folks who are senior leaders. But I think that they are caught in a. I'd like to believe that they are caught in a rock and a hard place. There was a gentleman. Man, I should have poured myself a cocktail, but there's a gentleman, Admiral Barnett, and I was really critical of this man and never met him, but I ended up flying back to Hawaii. He's the commander of Navy Region Hawaii. He came in after I left and received my compassionate reassignment. I went to an event, like one of their first town halls, they, being the Navy, hosted for the public, because they stopped talking to the public for a long time and we were sort of left in the dark. I had a sign there, like, sat front and center. I wanted to hear what these gentlemen had to say. I flew all the way back to Hawaii. I wanted to, like, hear it. I wanted to see it. I wanted them to see me. I had a sign that said, "The U.S. Navy poisoned my children." It was like a big fat photo of my kids. And, I've been very outspoken, like unapologetically outspoken. And after the entire, like, this town hall was a mess. Like, it was bad. Like, people in the public, I mean, they were pissed, and rightfully so, right? It was the first opportunity that they got, to address these individuals who were in charge of this mess. And Admiral Barnett jumped off the stage, and he came down and spoke to me, and he said, "I just want you to know that my wife and I pray for you, or praying for this community, and we understand, why it is that you're doing what you're doing." And, like, that meant a lot to me. Like, I understand that this man is, has just been given a shit sandwich, and he's just trying to do the best with it that he can, and he has a job to do, and I understand that. I do know that, I'm human, I have a heart, and that's why I'm speaking out. But I think that, when you're in a command position, and just like any other job, like, you're charged to do what it is that you're charged to do. And I think that people are just the people who have inherited the job now are doing the best that they can to clean up the mess of the decisions of others. One of which, who still remains, is Admiral Picaro.
And I was just going to ask, is there any cleanup operation or any operation to fix the fuel station at all going on?
Yeah, so thank you for bringing that up. Absolutely. So I think, one monumental thing that has come from this, and again, I think I told you there've been, 70 plus leaks at this, bulk storage facilities since, over the past 80 years. And this is not the first time that it's been the news or being talked about. It's just like it impacted so many people that there was just like no way you couldn't talk about it. Mm-hmm. The Secretary of Defense last year, about a year ago this time, made the decision that they were going to defuel and close down Red Hill. And while that is remarkable and truly something that, is, I think, in the best interest of everyone, it hasn't happened yet. So again, it briefs really well, but if Taiwan and China and everything being talked about, like, who knows? Who knows? But Tim, yes, I'm going to be an optimist here. It has, Secretary of Defense says it's going to be shut down and defueled, and there's a plan to do that, and we'll see if it comes to fruition.
Well, we're going to hold them to that statement. Now, before we start wrapping up here, is there any other topics concerning Red Hill that we did not cover that you definitely want everybody to know about?
I think we covered a lot of it. There is still I think one thing to highlight would be how appreciative we as a community, of how the entire community has come together, right? Because the people of Hawaii certainly don't have any reason, if you know the history of Hawaii and the military's occupation of Hawaii, you certainly know that the people of Hawaii have no real reason to open their arms to military families who have been impacted by this. But they have really showed the true spirit of aloha. And we had a court hearing today, and our Oahu water protectors and the Sierra Club and many families, civilian families of Hawaii, they showed up, to be a voice for their own communities, but to support us. And so I think that I'd love to end with, I couldn't be more grateful for the community coming together. And I think that there is no stronger message than standing in solidarity in something like this. And so we as an impacted community, we truly appreciate that more than anything.
Good. And I just thought of one last subject here. Have they brought in any medical specialists at all to help you folks at all?
No. I think the simple answer is no. We fought for that. We did some research on some of the medical assets they have at Tripler, and I've talked to the chief medical officer at Tripler, and I've said, hey, I know that you have this capability, this testing capability here. Can we utilize? And I'm like, oh, it's not been calibrated, and we don't have the people that know. They're not the subject matter experts on it. It's certainly the military has the resources. When we can set up all these COVID teams and travel teams, and we can set up an entire joint task force, Red Hill, which has now been established. They even have a fancy patch, definitely not cooler than this one. There's been an entire unit stood up for this, right? But we have been shouting to the rooftop, it's great that we're talking about defueling and that absolutely needs to happen, but what about the people? What about the medical care? But at this point, it's kind of falling on deaf ears. And I think that, even with the Red Hill Clinic, no one's going to go because, we're talking, this has been going on for 19 months and folks are just really fed up. So I wish there would have been, in the very beginning, a team that was established of specialists and folks who had worked other toxic exposures, Camp Lejeune being one of them, folks who were part of the determining factors of what presumptive conditions would be, for example, with the PACT Act, really smart people like that we could have brought in and we could have hired and we could have spent the funds to do that instead of spending the funds on hiring all these public affairs folks who just briefed this to the public as being not a big deal. So certainly we wish that would have happened, but it didn't.
All right. Yeah, that's unfortunate they haven't done that yet. And but we're going to start wrapping up here. And the way I start to wrap up is I always do a little memorial to my brother Dennis. He decided, he was a Vietnam and Gulf War veteran, and he decided to take his own life 22 years ago this past Christmas Eve. And so that's how I started my advocacy. was fighting for veteran suicide prevention, and because I know fighting with my demons, it's been rough. So new number 988, then press 1. You are guaranteed to talk to a real human being. You will not get any recorded messages. You will not be put on any on hold. Well, you might have to be put on hold once they talk to you, but you will talk to a human. All right. Also, they have what's called vet centers now popping up all over the country. If you are a veteran and you need to talk to somebody on any subject, you can walk into a vet center, no appointment needed. Your family members can go in there and get counseling too, as long as their initial visit is pertaining to a military issue, and it's all free. And January 17th of this year, on my birthday, I like to say I had a part in this with all the calls and letters and everything I've written, but I don't think I did. But new policy by the VA is if you are a veteran and you feel like you're going to hurt yourself or somebody else, you can go to any medical facility in this country, regardless if you're in the VA system or not. You can go seek help at any medical facility in this country, and the VA will pick up your bill. All you got to do is say, hey, I feel like I'm going to hurt myself, or I might do some damage to other people. That hospital now has an obligation to call the VA, and the VA will pick up your tab. And then, right before we end up here, real quick, I want to do a shout out to the fine folks at Veterans Insurance Network. This is a new nonprofit helping veterans find other nonprofits and benefits that they're not aware of, and help them achieve in getting those benefits and aid that they desperately need. And Mandy, I want to thank you so very much. I've been reading up on your fight a lot, and you are one impressive individual. And it's a complete honor that you came onto my show.
Tim, thank you so much for having me. Again, I truly appreciate your kind words, but again, I am one of 93,000 people. There's a whole hell of a lot of super strong mama bears out there, and folks who have been impacted by this, who have been fighting just as hard as I have. And, you know, I appreciate their advocacy as well, and everything that we've done as a community to come together and do this. And again, I just appreciate you lending this platform, you know, to me and to our community to be able to amplify like the Red Hill story, so that more folks know about this. And you've been doing this for a long time. Like, I know that you're you know, a very humble individual, but I know that you had you know, a big pull in the PACT Act, and I appreciate that. And I just want folks in Hawaii to know, like, Tim co-authored a book. It's called The Promise. If you haven't read it, go on Amazon, get a copy of it.
Yeah. Right there, folks.
Hey, like, who knew you had it so handy? Yes. So,
and I have a copy for you.
Human, and so thank you.
I have a copy for you. So,
thank you.
Okay. Now, once again, thank you so very, very much. This has been an absolute honor for me. And all you people affected by Red Hill, I want you all to know that not only myself, but people at like Burn Pits 360, Veterans Insurance Network, we have your back. We have been calling our senators. We have been calling our congressmen. We have been calling the media to get this noticed more. And I also want you to know that you're not alone in this. There's other bases that are just now finding out that they've been contaminated as well. So they're just now starting their fight. So they're looking at you and getting inspired, because you all are very inspirational. And I'm not sure who Belinda Miles is, but thank you for these kind words that you're putting into our private chat here. I
Let
wish
me
I
tell you
could.
about Belle. Belle
Uh-huh.
is a veteran of the Navy, and she's one of those people that are out there fighting a good fight too. So thanks, Belle,
All
for
right.
watching. Yeah.
All right, Belinda, you keep up that good fight. Don't ever lose faith. Matter of fact, all of you with Red Hill, do not lose faith. You're on the right track. You're fighting the good fight. You're creating good trouble. Bless you there, John Lewis. We do miss you, sir. All right. And if you want to, could hold on after we go off the air here, so I can talk to you for a minute. And everybody, this will be posted on YouTube here shortly, within the next hour, and then tomorrow, it'll be available on Apple, Spotify, I believe, iHeart, Google, and Amazon. That's right, Amazon just started picking us up again. So I want to thank you all for joining us. I do not have an update for next week. I'm hoping to get some people from George Air Force Base on, so you can learn more about what I mean by being gaslit by DOD and everything with contamination. But if not, we'll have a show next week. Don't worry about that. All right, folks. You have a good one. Thank you for joining us, and see you next week.